And joining me now is Independent Senator Bernie Sanders of Vermont. Senator Sanders, welcome back to Meet the Press.
Good to be with you.
It's great to have you, Senator. Let's start off by talking about Vice President Harris's closing arguments. She is arguing that Donald Trump is a fascist. It does come on the heels of General John Kelly calling her a fascist, Mark Milley calling her a fascist. You just heard me discussing this very matter with Senator J.D. Vance. Let me put this question to you simply, Senator. Do you believe that Donald Trump is a fascist?
I don't like using those words, but clearly he has a strong tendency to authoritarianism and to undermining American democracy. Look, this is a guy who provoked an insurrection in January 6, 2021, to prevent, and the first time in American history, a peaceful transfer of power. So does Donald Trump believe in democracy, believe in the rule of law? There is a reason, and you raised this a moment ago with Vance, why his own vice president for 4 years, Mike Pence, says he is not supporting Donald Trump. Why Mitt Romney, the 2012 Republican candidate, not supporting Donald Trump. And it's not because of policy issues. It is because they understand that Trump is an authoritarian, does not believe in the rule of law, and for 100 reasons is unfit to be president of the United States.
Senator, given that you think it is too far to label Donald Trump as a fascist, do you think it's a mistake by Vice President Harris to do so?
Well, look, he is an author. Call it what you want. This is a guy who does not believe in democracy, who is trying to divide us up. You can describe him as a fascist. You can describe him as an authoritarian. But to my mind, and what I focus on, is what's happening to the working class in this country. You may recall just a few weeks ago, Donald Trump did his photo opportunity at a McDonald's. All right? He loves McDonald's. Great. But he's asked the question, do you think we should raise the minimum wage to a living wage so that people at McDonald's and millions of other workers don't have to live on starvation wages? He ducked the question. Now, how does it happen that a billionaire cannot support raising the minimum wage from $7.25 to a living wage? Kamala Harris supports raising the minimum wage to at least $15 an hour. I would go higher. But for a billionaire to force people to be working for $9, $10, $11 an hour is absolutely absurd. And if I could add, I'm in Erie, Pennsylvania right now. He was here a few weeks ago. And he gets up there and he does his rally and he meanders. And he says, you know, overtime pay. When I was in private business, I did everything that I could to avoid paying people time and a half overtime. I would hire other workers so I didn't have to pay overtime. And true to his statement, when he was president, he restricted overtime, made it harder for people to get overtime. Harris and President Biden expanded overtime pay. How does it happen? You tell me that a billionaire hanging out with billionaires, supported by the richest guy in the world, cannot support time and a half overtime for millions of working people.
And really, you're talking about the messaging here, Senator. So let me ask you about that very topic. Vice President Harris started her campaign calling Donald Trump weird, saying she wanted to restore joy to politics. Obviously, a shift now, casting Trump as a real threat to democracy. Do you think that Kamala Harris is giving voters enough reason to vote for her instead of just against Donald Trump?
Well, that's a great question. Look, protecting American democracy ain't nothing more important than that. Protecting a woman's right to control her own body, which Trump opposes, nothing, to me, enormously important. The fact that Donald Trump thinks that climate change is a hoax, in opposition to what every scientist who has studied the issue believes, is also of enormous importance. But if you're asking me, do I think there should be more focus on economics, on the fact that over the last 50 years there's been a massive transfer of wealth from the bottom 90% to the top 1%, to the fact that 60% of our people are living paycheck to paycheck, while the billionaire class has never had it so good, while Donald Trump wants to give even more tax breaks to billionaires. You talked a moment ago with Vance about their idea to eliminate all federal taxes. This would be the biggest transfer of wealth in the history of this country. It would mean the billionaire class, the millionaires, no longer pay a nickel of taxes. But you go to the grocery store, you go and you buy a refrigerator, you're a working class person, prices are going to soar. The idea that you eliminate all taxes, replace them by a tariff is insane economics. It will hurt desperately poor people and enrich the very rich. And there is a reason why in Trump's campaign, you got 3 billionaires pouring hundreds of millions of dollars to make sure that he's elected. They no doubt think it's a great idea that they don't have to pay any more in taxes while we don't raise the minimum wage to a living wage.
Well, that was going to be my follow-up question. So now we can move on to my next question, which is about the Middle East. Of course, as you know, as we track the developments in the Middle East, Israel launched retaliatory strikes against Iran on Friday. I spoke with one of the leaders of the Uncommitted National Movement in Michigan. Of course, that's the group that led hundreds of thousands of primary voters to cast ballots against President Biden in the primary, a protest vote for his handling of the war in the Middle East. She told me that she was not voting for Kamala Harris or Donald Trump. Take a look. I'll get your reaction on the other side.
Frankly, Vice President Harris' unwillingness to adopt a more humanitarian policy, she hasn't earned my vote. It seems the signal that we've gotten from her and her campaign is that she is willing to risk battleground state like Michigan by continuing to alienate young people, Arab Americans, and Muslim women.
Senator, what is your message to this voter, to voters like her? And are you concerned that this issue could cost Kamala Harris Michigan?
Well, Leila, I believe that President Biden in many ways has been the most progressive, pro-worker president since FDR, the only president to ever walk on a picket line to strongly support unions. But I have to tell you, and I've said this a million times, I strongly disagree with their policies on Gaza. Israel, of course, had a right to defend itself against the horrific terrorist attack from Hamas on October 17th. But they have now gone to war against the entire Palestinian people. 42,000 dead, 100,000 wounded, the destruction of all of Gaza, and now starvation of children. So my own view has been that the United States should not continue to provide financial aid or offensive weapons to Netanyahu's right-wing extremist government. But what I would say to Leila and to all those people who are thinking of not voting or maybe even voting for Trump, Trump is even worse on this issue. I can tell you we are desperately trying, at the very least, to get humanitarian aid to feed starving children into Gaza. Certainly Kamala Harris and Joe Biden support that. We can't even get Republicans to feed the kids who are in desperate shape. So on that issue, while I disagree with Biden and Harris, they are still better, a lot better, than what Trump and Vance are talking about.
Senator, finally, I have to ask you about some developments related to Elon Musk. The Wall Street Journal reporting this week that Musk, who's, of course, a major government contractor, someone who has security clearance that gives him access to highly classified information, has been in regular contact with Vladimir Putin for the past 2 years. My question for you, is it appropriate for Elon Musk, a Trump supporter, to have these secret contacts with Vladimir Putin? And what, if anything, do you think the Biden administration can and should do about it?
No, I don't think it's appropriate. Look, Musk is a very smart, aggressive guy. He is the wealthiest person in the world. And what really interests me is if, God forbid, Trump were to win, whether it would be Elon Musk running the government and Trump working for him or the other way around. But the idea that you have somebody like Musk who has massive amounts of federal contracts, campaigning hard, putting huge amounts of money into Trump's campaign, man, if there's ever been a conflict of interest, that's it.
All right. Senator Bernie Sanders, thank you so much for your perspective on all of these topics. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.